Hi, my name's Lauren Epstein, and you're listening to You're Hired, broadcasting here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be doing a show on how to write a resume. It's kind of like the first thing you want to do in getting a job is have a good resume. And it's changed so much over the years. I know over the last 20 years, I'm sure I've seen tens of thousands of resumes. And there are some very common errors that people make, spelling mistakes, not really telling a good story, lying on their resume. That's always pretty common. And with me today, I've got a couple of fantastic guests, very special guests. With me today, I have Amanda Augustine. She is the career advice expert at TopResume. TopResume is a leader in resume writing services. Amanda has over 20 years of experience as a career coach and certified professional resume writer. I didn't even know that was a certification. That'll be interesting to hear about. Yeah. Amanda loves to help people land the right job and has been featured on various media outlets. In addition, she is followed by more than 16,000 folks on Twitter. And we'll share your Twitter handle at the end of the show. Also, welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also with us on the show today is Maureen Pappas. She is a talent acquisition professional and runs the Talent Strategy Group, which is an executive search firm that identifies talent for organizations in the D.C. area.
Correct.
And she has over 2 decades of experience with helping executives find the right jobs, including making sure their resumes look great.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the show, Maureen.
Thanks for having me.
I imagine you have a lot of resume writing experience talking to folks.
Absolutely. That's one of the first things I do when I talk to people, and we go through the process looking at their resume. That's paramount. I want to see that first, make sure that's properly crafted. So when I present it to a client, it tells a good story, and it just makes the hiring process so much easier.
And they don't look like an idiot with having spelling errors or a bad resume.
Absolutely not.
Right. Because, I think the thing that folks don't realize when their resume is not designed to get them the job, right? It's designed to get them the interview.
Or a call,
or a call. Like the first conversation, an interview, a conversation with somebody, it's that shot across the bow, and it needs to have a certain substance. So we're going to get into some of those things today about what you need to put in your resume and what you need to be conscious of when you're building your resume so that you get this first call, you get the first interview. And I'm looking forward to hearing the thoughts from Amanda. A little full disclosure, who have been writing my resume for probably 30 years, and as a professional, I sent my resume last year to TopResume, and I was completely impressed. Now, TopResume is not paying to be on the show, just so we're clear. I just thought that they were so good at writing my resume, which landed me a great job, that I'd have them on as experts. And I've known Maureen for a bit, and she's a great professional, and I thought she would have a lot to say about this. So let's first talk about kind of what's going on with resumes today. What's changed in resumes? Amanda, why don't you start off?
Sure. What's interesting is that the resume seems to be one piece of the puzzle today. We know that 93% of employers are going to Google you online and see what's out there about you, including your social media profiles. And so the most important thing is to make sure whatever your resume is saying, that it's backed up and supported in other places in terms of how you speak about yourself and also what you're putting out there online, because you need this consistent story about your career and your qualifications. Employers are looking to make sure that you are telling a consistent story and that it all matches up, that there's not something that's raising a red flag. So I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is people questioning the value of the resume, and I'll say it's still one of the most important pieces, but it's not enough on its own.
When you say people questioning the resume, you mean candidates or employers?
Yeah. You hear talk on probably both arenas, but I hear a lot of job seekers ask, I have a LinkedIn profile. Do I need a resume? And they really do serve different purposes. So absolutely, but you need both. And that's the difference.
Right.
Amanda, don't you also feel that given all the internet recruiting that employers just get bombarded with resumes? I mean, the average job posting gets 200 to 300 resumes.
Oh, yeah.
So
definitely,
really focusing in on your resume and telling a good story is absolutely key for you to stand out among the other candidates.
Definitely, Maureen. And the one thing I'd say is that when you're crafting your resume today, you have to remember you're crafting it for a couple different audiences, not just the hiring manager who really understands what you're doing, or the high-level recruiter who really gets what you do for a living, but that entry-level sourcer who might be doing an initial pass, and even before that, a piece of electronics, a software, an applicant tracking system that's scanning your resume based on keywords and ranking it and then sending over the highest ranking resumes to an actual human to look at. So you have to craft your resume with both an electronic screen as well as a human screen in mind, and know that there are certain rules that the average person isn't aware of that your resume is being judged or based upon.
Yeah, I think that we should discuss the applicant tracking system. So an applicant tracking system is a piece of software that a company will buy, and they're generally very expensive. And they're designed to be like a database of resumes, but also they track you going through your interview process. And it allows the employer to see what's a really good source and how much they're spending on their recruiting. Most companies don't have an applicant tracking system. All the big companies do.
Absolutely.
I mean, all the large Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000, and many smaller companies do, but not every company does. And I think getting back to the fundamentals of a resume, depending on the job, you may or may not need a resume, right? I mean, if you're going to work as a car mechanic and you want to go to Bob's auto shop, he may not ask for a resume. He may say, well, fix this car or explain to me how to fix a car. So, but we're talking about folks who do need resumes.
Exactly.
Right? And even if they don't need resumes, or we'll talk about this too, having an online presence, that's a whole brand new thing, because a lot of 100 million people plus are on LinkedIn, and a lot of people have some type of social media breadcrumb, regardless of what jobs they have.
But, there's also free sites where companies can search. So like the car mechanic, you might want to, the owner of the car mechanic shop maybe the office manager may go on to Indeed, where you can upload your resume for free, and they can identify people off that. So pretty much, I think almost everybody should have some form of a resume.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah. So if you have a resume, and we're talking about, let's just kind of talk about the applicant tracking system a bit. Not all applicant tracking systems do what it is that you were saying, Amanda, which is kind of automatically sort. There are a lot of really cool technologies out there that sort, but some of us recruiters, we don't trust it, right? We want to see all the resumes. So these are all the different variables that go into play when you're kind of putting in your resume into this black hole. So I would ask you, Maureen, tell me, what are some of the things that you would tell somebody before you really get into the writing of the resume, but the philosophy of a resume? Like, what's the thing they want to be thinking about when they craft this document?
What I tell people is to write your resume for the job that you want. Most people, when I first see, I would say about 80% of the resumes I see are what I consider a laundry list of tasks that they've done. You really want to tell a story. Sometimes I would get resumes and I'm like, what does this person want to do? I have no idea. So I have a style or a format that I like to work with my candidates, where they either have an objective, or a more seasoned person would have a summary. This is what I'm all about. A lot of resumes will say energetic, enthusiastic, and it's like the 10th word in the summary that tells me they're an accountant. I want to know you're an accountant straight up front. And then underneath that, you can really highlight your core competencies, your core skills. And then I always like a resume that talks about, it's a chronological resume, and it tells a story. You want to quantify and qualify your skills. So I typically interview people and then give them, I pull more information out and I give them tips on what maybe they didn't include in their resume. So the bottom line is, your resume wants to tell a story to the reader and intrigue the reader enough to pick up the phone or send an email and say, I want to talk to you. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, Amanda, what do you tell somebody first before they even put paper to pen? What would be some of the underpinnings of what the resume needs to be?
I 100% agree with Maureen. The first question I ask is, well, what do you want to do? And why do you feel that you're qualified for that? Or what about your history, your education, your experiences in and out of the workplace have helped you gain skills that make you a good candidate for this type of role. Because when you get down to it, a resume is a piece of advertising. It is a marketing tool.
Absolutely.
And it's not written for you to talk about all your needs and wants. It's a document that's supposed to showcase and tell somebody why you're qualified for the role that you're going after. The top third of that resume is the most important part. It's the snapshot, and that needs to really quickly and clearly explain to anybody who's quickly scanning a resume what is it this person wants to do and what about them makes them a good candidate for that type of role, so that someone wants to learn more about you and actually look at the rest of the resume.
Well, I love the fact that you guys think of a story as, a resume as a story.
Absolutely.
Because I think that, next week I'm giving a workshop here in DC on creating your own professional narrative, and it's using a story format of, what's the background, what's the problem, and what was the solution, which is how people love to hear things. We all love movies, we all love books, and if you're saying this is a marketing piece, using it as a storytelling device sounds like the right thing to do. So what would be the narrative, Amanda, that you would kind of have someone craft?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's a little different for every person. To be honest, I'm not a fan of objectives. And the only reason I say
I'm sorry, a fan of what?
Objective statements.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I say that, even if the person's entry level, is that when you hear objective, you think of it saying, I am a proactive, self-starter, passionate person looking to put my skills to work. It's this fluffy, run-of-the-mill statement. And so, I always say you're going to replace it with some sort of little summary, but you want to think about, if I'm looking at jobs, and I found that there's a certain type of role I'm after. I'm looking for a marketing communications role in the healthcare industry that's really focused on, putting out new, print advertising and online digital, ads or that sort of thing. I want to look at a bunch of jobs and see what are they looking for. And then I want to think and say, okay, what experience do I have that makes me a good fit for this role? Is it the years of experience I've had in that industry or in that field? Do I have any types of accomplishments I can think of where I've helped increase brand awareness or drive revenue or reduce costs? But whatever it is, I want that little summary at the top to basically tell somebody, what am I great at? What am I qualified to do? And why am I passionate about it? It's your elevator pitch, in other words.
It's interesting you say that, because we did a show on how to get a government job, and Corliss Jackson was on, and we talked about writing resumes, because a government resume
very different.
Actually, well, maybe it is and it isn't, in that they want you to tell them the stuff that they want to hear. So if they don't see certain words in your resume, they'll pass up your resume. And I think the truth is that in the commercial sector, if I'm reading a resume and I'm looking for someone who does X, Y, and Z, and in the resume right up front it says, I did X, Y, and Z, it connects in my brain. Because I, as the first resume reader, I'm looking for a target, and the target in my brain is what's written in the job description.
Right.
It's not about you so much. I mean, I'll infer, but I'll be thinking, what does my boss want me to show him? He's not going to want me to show him a resume or bring someone in who's not qualified. So my incentive is to get someone who meets that job description.
One of the things that I do with my candidates, I say go out and get 3 to 4 job descriptions that you feel that you're qualified for or where you want to take your career. And look at the verbiage. Use that language for inspiration in your resume.
I do the exact same thing.
And, it's all there for you. Yeah. It's kind of like Dorothy.
So would you do this for every single... See, I think my wife does this when she was writing resumes. She does a different resume for every job.
Oh.
And not a completely different resume, but she tailors her resume for the job.
I would say what I typically suggest is you have a core resume. And let's say one of the jobs needs a very specific skill set. You have it, but you don't have it in your core resume. Then put it in. Exactly what you said. The screener is going to look at the resume. That screener then has to bring it to the hiring manager. If they can't explain or there's questions in your resume, it's going to go in the no pile. You want to make it easy for the reader to then go to the hiring manager, the initial screener, go to the hiring manager and say, here's a resume I found for you. It's got all what you're looking for.
Right.
I agree. And I don't think, and this is something I emphasize a lot, I actually just did a chat last Monday about this, but it shouldn't necessarily be an entire overhaul of your resume for every job that you're going to apply to. I would then say, are you applying to wildly different jobs? Because you do want some sort of focused role. And that's why, exactly what Maureen said, I asked someone to grab 3 to 5 job descriptions and look at those and use those to create the base. And then when you're going for the actual application, you're tweaking little bits. You may swap out a few core competencies or reword the way you describe a certain skill set in the professional summary so that it's obvious to the reader how you match up to this role. But it's almost an evolution of the resume as opposed to a complete wipeout and rebuild for every job application.
I agree.
That's a lot of work. And you got to remember, if you're putting that application out in a lot of spots and you're not applying directly to the company, your resume may come across the same recruiter's table more than once. And if there are wildly different versions of you out there, they start questioning, what do you really want to do, and do you really have a clear idea?
Good point.
Interesting. So we're going to get into more of the technicalities of what a good resume would look like and some of the things that someone would say. I wanted to talk about some of the, kind of the edge case resumes where people do the extraordinary to get noticed. I had a friend, this guy Willie Hernandez in college back in the 80s, who was a graphic artist. And he took his resume, which was a common college resume, and he had it carved into a piece of 8.5 by 11 black reflective glass. And he sent it to a graphic design shop. It cost him like $80 or $90. And back then, that was a bit of money. And he got the job. Right. So here he is as a graphic artist, taking his resume and doing something really cool and creative and getting the job. And I know someone who wrote their resume in PowerPoint. And sent their resume to someone in PowerPoint. This was in the 90s, and again, using the technology that's available to make your resume a little bit more interesting. What do you ladies think about that?
I think that was the 80s and 90s, and everything's electronic now. It really depends. Those are more creative, but everything now is so database driven and scanning, and I think it's hard. Now, let's say you were going for a job with Martha Stewart. You might bake a cake and put a resume on a cake. That would be something a little bit different, but that's really more, I would say, on the creative side. Do you agree, Amanda?
Yes.
The creative.
There's always those stories that come out of the person who put their resume on the candy bar or in a plant or something like that, or went this wildly different approach and it got all this attention and it landed them the job. And I love that, but I hate those examples going out into the masses and everyone thinking that this is the right strategy, because that only works for a specific individual who has that creativity and is going for a very creative role. And it's not something that I think everyone should attempt to do and apply. Even the creatives, I think you have to be really careful with that, because if it's not done perfectly, it is going to blow up in your face. And it's not necessarily something that you can repeat over and over again. And that's something to keep in mind.
So, I agree with what you're saying, and I am a big proponent of these things, because as a recruiter, I love it when someone does the extra, stands out in some way. So, for example, if an engineer built something that was kind of cool, or wrote a piece of code that had their resume in a really interesting way, or engaged me, kind of created, again, we're talking about storytelling, right? So if I worked for a naval architecture firm, which I did in recruiting naval architects, if a naval architect wrote their resume in a way that made it more interesting using technology, I think I'd be a little more engaged. It sounds like you're not against these things, but using them wisely, which is, again, we're talking about the philosophy of this is a storytelling device.
Exactly.
This is a marketing piece.
And you still need the backup, piece of paper,
right,
Word
right,
file,
not in lieu of, maybe not.
Whatever.
Right, okay.
Yeah. It's not something I'm not going to say, hey, accountant, I think you should go do this. But in specific roles, products, designers, creative directors, that sort of thing, I see that happening more often. And when it's done well, it can be really impressive. It's just, again, if it's a piece of marketing collateral that you're creating. And with any good piece of marketing material, you're thinking about your target audience and you're building something based upon their needs and what you know about that target audience.
That's interesting. So one of the things I hate in resumes is typos and spelling mistakes and grammar problems. So what do you feel about that, and how do we correct for that?
100% agree. If you're writing your own resume, I'd say, write it, read it again. Read it from the bottom going to the top as opposed to top to bottom. You're more likely to pick up errors when you're not reading it as a story, but when you're starting and you're skimming words and that sort of thing. Don't
print it too, Amanda.
That autocorrect and spell check are going to find everything, because they won't. And then hand it off to somebody, your English major friend, the one who writes for a living, somebody else to take a look at it as well, because you get so in depth, you get so focused on this resume that you start missing the little errors.
Absolutely. And I print it off too, not just electronically.
Oh,
I think when you print it and you read it and you go line by line, it's much.
And it doesn't hurt to have somebody look at it for free. There are so many services out there, where you can get a free evaluation. You don't have to rely on yourself. There are plenty of services out there, obviously TopResume included, but there are plenty of places where you can send it out and say, someone take a second look at this for me, please.
Sure, I'm sure any alumni, if you're a college student, any alumni would help you. If you're from a military, lots of military organizations would help you. But like you're saying, have friends take a look at it and tell you what they think. I know anything I write goes through my my channel of my wife. I mean, she looks at everything. She takes everything apart, and then maybe my mother-in-law, who then takes everything apart, and it makes me feel confident when I send it out, because that is the worst. Right? When you send something as a candidate, sending something out and going, oh man, I spelt that word wrong.
I know.
Like where or something like that. Some silly word that you could easily miss.
But you also want to ask for...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. For raw feedback. Some people will look at your resume, oh, this is great. And, as a recruiter, when I'm talking with a candidate and I see a resume, I said, how many recruiters have you spoken to already? They're like, well, you're the third one. Well, this is probably why. I have a philosophy. If you're not getting the interview, it's your resume. And if you're not getting the job, it's your interviewing skills.
Oh, totally.
So I tell that to my candidates, and I say, let's get it straight, your resume straight right here and now. And then once we fix that, then we can move forward.
Right.
And it's really served me well using that strategy.
And Maureen and I went to an HR networking group a couple of weeks ago, and people there who are HR professionals were sharing their resume electronically, say, hey, give me feedback. Right? They're going for HR jobs. The best person to ask is another HR professional.
Yeah, I get a lot of those resumes.
You get a lot of those resumes. So, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I'd say is there's also the thing of the friend test. And the reason I'd say that is give it to somebody who's absolutely not in your industry and has no real clue what you're looking for, what you do for a living, and have them look at your resume for no more than a minute. And if they can't come back to you and say, this is the job that you're after, and if they can't quickly pick up on your goal and why you're qualified, your professional summary and the title at the top isn't clear enough.
Absolutely.
Because we know people skim quickly. Don't assume that the first person who's going to review your resume has in-depth knowledge of your industry or field.
One of the strategies that I use is, each one of the bullet lines. At the end of that statement, I say, so what? Does it really have an impact? Is it making sense? Can you remove it from your resume? And we probably will get into the technicalities of a resume shortly.
So you're asking certain questions to yourself when you're reading the resume. Is it answering these questions? Is it making me feel a certain way? Is it telling me something?
Is it relevant?
Is it relevant?
Yeah.
Right? That's great. I like that. So let's take a quick station break. My name's Lauren Epstein. You've been listening to You're Hired here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. If you want to find us on Twitter, you can look up at Lauren Epstein, LORNE EPSTEIN. You can find us on Facebook at Your Hired Radio. So just go to your Facebook browser, type in Your Hired Radio. Or you can come to a meetup that we're giving in about a week and a half on interview skills. If you go to meetup.com and type in Lauren Epstein, you'll find that we're giving a meetup on April 4th at the Marriott Embassy Row Hotel from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. You're going to learn how to tell your professional narrative. And I want to just also shout out to my crew. Today, my production engineer is Afote Odai, who is doing an awesome job making us all sound great. And our production assistant, Alex Pascasello, who's about to go to college next year. That's pretty exciting for Alex.
Where's he going?
We don't know yet, but he wants to be an engineer. Clearly, we're going to have him take his resume and look at it.
Yeah.
So again, I want to welcome my guests. We're talking about how to write a resume. With me today is Amanda Augustine from TopResume and Maureen Pappas, who is a talent acquisition professional. Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of a resume. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the paper, right? If we're going to have a printed resume, what kind of paper should it be on?
I think plain resume paper is fine. You can get it at Staples or any one of the...
So white paper.
Yeah, white, gray, maybe an ivory color, a nice thick quality paper.
Now, what do you think about that, Amanda? What's your recommendations on paper?
I would say that's playing it safe for sure. And I would always think about, what's the type of company you're dealing with. I've worked in startups most of my career. As long as it's on a nice piece of white paper, they don't care that it's not the heavy weight, that sort of thing. They do almost everything digitally. You still need to bring paper copies of your resume, no doubt. But I think they're less likely to judge you on is it the nice, correct type of resume paper. You're interviewing at a more traditional organization. Definitely. If they're more buttoned up, then you need to be more buttoned up. You need to show that you fit the culture.
Yeah, often you'll send your resume to the recruiter. They'll print it out for the managers.
Yeah, most of the time the managers have it. But in the event that a manager doesn't have it, you want to have one on you because they could be running from meeting to meeting.
A lot of them, 4 or 5, right? If you're going to have, that's what I recommend.
Yeah. And then a manager could be running to a meeting and they don't have your resume on you, then it just doesn't.
Yeah.
And you're not prepared.
Right.
You're not prepared. So.
And what about were you going to say something about the paper, Amanda?
Well, I was going to say you need a copy for yourself that you can refer to during the interview, and you need a couple copies because I can't tell you how many times some other person on the team, gets looped into, hey, can you spend 15 minutes with this candidate? I want to get your feel for them. And you can't assume they've ever seen your resume before, and you can't assume that the other person actually passed your resume on to that person so that they're walking in with one.
It also shows that you're prepared.
Yeah.
You're prepared, and you've done your homework.
Now, the other magic question, what font? Bum, bum, bum.
It's
what
funny
font? What font size?
Too many articles about this.
The font, sometimes Times, sometimes, what is it, Calibri?
Calibri?
I'm a big fan of Calibri. I'm a big fan of Cambria, of Calibri Light.
No less than
people
11.
Complain about Times and call it the sweatpants font. I think that's a little ridiculous.
Wait, they call it the what? The what?
What?
The sweatpants. The sweatpants font because it's so common, it's lazy, quote unquote.
Oh.
Really, there are 2 types, right? There's serif, which is your fancier ones, your Times, Cambria. They have the little extra things on the words, and then your sans serif, which are Arial, Tahoma, Calibri. I say you pick one that feels good to you. Typically, the ones that are sans serif that are a little slicker, they tend to look better on a digital version of your resume, and the ones that are serif, such as Times, New Roman, or Cambria, they tend to look best when they're printed out. And so, again, I kind of think of what industry are you targeting or what type of field are you in, and that may sway your decision.
So when we talk about serif, so people know what that means, is at the end of the letter, of the line, there's a little dangly part, right? That's a serif.
Yeah.
Sans serif means without the dangly part. So like Arial and those other fonts. I think I am preferential to the ones without.
Mm-hmm, me too.
It's easier to read.
Am I.
Mm-hmm. And as far as font size, no smaller than 11, I say.
What do you think, Amanda?
I think it depends on which font you're going with. I've gone as small as about 10.5 for the primary font, but that's only for, I want to say it's Calibri Light or something. But I agree. This should not be an eye chart. People are scanning these quickly. The Ladders did a study years ago that found that the average recruiter quickly scans a resume for about 6 seconds before they decide it's worth my time. I want to look at this more closely, or nope, not right. Throw it in the trash.
Yeah, I'm less than six.
That's about right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And of course, they self-reported a couple minutes, I think, of actually looking at each resume, and then they actually timed people and said, you don't actually. You spend a few minutes once you're interested. But if you're not interested, you're chucking them pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
And they're going through a lot of applications, and so that's why the format of your resume is just as important as the content of your resume, because they have to be able to scan quickly and identify the most important parts of your history.
Which brings me to the point that I prefer the bullet points. I don't like the...
We'll get into the bullet points.
Okay.
I want to stay focused on the type. So there's a couple of pet peeves I have is bold, underline, and then if there's a link, it'll end up printing out as color. Mm-hmm. So, and then different size fonts. So the name will be 14 point, and then the address will be 10 point, and then the body will be, and even within the resume, there'll be different point sizes. What do you ladies think about that? Go ahead, Maureen. You can go ahead first.
I don't mind the hot links. I think the hot links are great. We were talking before, if you have a creative type, they can have a hot link to their portfolio. If somebody doesn't wants to tell us if a recruiter isn't familiar with a company that a candidate worked for and they have a hot link there, they can quickly go and look and see about the company.
But how about if I have my hot link on my digital resume, but when I print it out, I remove it? Because that's people don't do. They have the hot link, which will have an underline.
Correct.
And then I print it out, and it's underlined, and it may be in a different color.
That doesn't bother me, but, Amanda, you might have a different point of view.
No, I'm okay with hyperlinks. I actually, the resume is pretty cut and dry. You're on something online, you can really give more color to your experience and add multimedia and all that fun stuff. The resume, that's really not the place to go nuts. This is the more cut and dry version of your story. I like having the hyperlink to your LinkedIn profile. I like the hyperlinks.
But on your printed copy,
do you want it printed?
Yeah, on the printed version.
It doesn't necessarily bother me as long as it doesn't. The only thing I would look out for is that if you put it into a digital form or download as a PDF to print, does the font size suddenly look really weird or something looks really off so that it doesn't look consistent? That would bother me. Otherwise, it really doesn't bother me too much.
No, it doesn't bother me.
In terms of size, I actually like the name and your professional title, what you want people to see just below your summary, to be larger than everything else, because I want someone to very quickly say, this is who this person is, this is the type of role they're after.
How much larger?
And then my headers are always about a point larger than the main body.
I agree.
It's nothing crazy. The people who start changing and using lots of different fonts and lots of different sizes in random spots, that drives me nuts. But I like having my headers a little bigger so that, again, it's a little visually more appealing. And the idea is you're always finding ways to kind of add white space and break up the content so that your eyes don't glaze over when you look at the resume.
So we're talking about two font sizes on a resume. Mm-hmm. We're saying that it should be a font without a serif for the most part.
Right.
And we're also saying that it's black. We hadn't really said it, but when I said the colors, no one said anything otherwise.
No, typically black. But one thing that I do...
and what about bold? Let's talk about the bold for a second.
Okay.
How do you guys feel about bold?
I feel that bold should be used on the company name and the dates and maybe the title. Your title.
So the top level information that someone who's first screening it is just going to get called out.
Yes.
What do you think about that, Amanda?
I use it sparingly. If there's something that I can't find a way to bring farther up in the resume, I may bold a quantitative result of something, but I don't like to go nuts. I like to keep that at a minimum. I don't care if it's bolded or not, but I like that all the companies are formatted the same way, all the titles are formatted the same way, so that when someone's quickly glancing, they easily identify these are the company names, this is the title. So whether it's bolded or it's underlined or it's in all caps, as long as it's consistent, and I think that's the key for any of this, If you pick something, be consistent. The second it's not consistent, it looks awful.
Agreed. One thing I do, Amanda, and I change the font. What I'll tell a candidate is if they're working for a company that's not well known, I usually say, can you write a brief overview of the company? Maybe it's a government contractor, it's a media organization, what the revenues are. And I have that in italic right below the company. Okay. And then before the bullets.
Yeah.
Amanda and I went to the same school, I think.
They're readily recognizable. Everybody knows Walmart. Everybody knows,
exactly
those sorts of things. A one-liner, especially if you're trying to switch industries or anything's changing in the slightest bit, you use that one-liner to your advantage to highlight whatever about that company resonates with whoever you're targeting next. So whether it's the size or the territory they covered or the types of customers or clients they dealt with, that's the part you emphasize, and you downplay whatever is very different than what you're targeting today.
So let's get into some of the content in the resume. So I am a big fan of no addresses.
I am too.
Amanda?
Yep.
No. So
agreed.
The first thing
street address.
No street address.
State and zip, but no street address.
Okay, so the first thing is name. Are we in agreement on that?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I like to see city and state just so that I know do they live near me? Do they live near where the job is? But I don't want to see their address.
Right.
What do you think about that, Amanda?
100% agreed, especially if you're posting this resume on different job boards. It's also a security concern. People don't need that information quite yet. They just want to know, are you a local candidate or not? And if you're not, you probably are taking all the information, all the location information off unless you have, an address that you can, actually use down there.
And then I like to see phone numbers and email addresses. Phone number and an email address.
Exactly.
Yep. I just add also the URL to your LinkedIn profile because they're going to look for it anyway. If you have a common name, you don't want them to confuse you with anyone else. Plus, you have the added bonus that for free, you can customize your public URL with LinkedIn so that it's yet another way you can brand yourself.
Yeah. Mine says you're hired.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it in
mine's my Twitter handle. Job search Amanda.
Cool. All right. So that's the first part. Now I'm going to leave it to you. Guide us through, and we'll go back and forth, but guide us through, Amanda, what's the next piece after we have our name, our general location, and our contact information?
I want to see a professional title. And that's normally what are you targeting? If this is the part that you can often change specifically for the role. So if it's, marketing communications director or marketing communications professional, you want to start using the language that you're seeing in the job description, but right up front, let them know what you're about and then use your professional summary to provide more color around that. If you are looking to make a radical change and you feel uncomfortable putting that job title at the top of your resume, then I put objective : in that title. Because again, this is going to help you make it past some of those robots, make it past those initial people who are screening your resume.
So Amanda, are you saying that you would put name and the heading and then human resource leader, and then underneath that, excuse me, is your professional summary? Yep.
Okay. That's my preferred way. I mean, I normally try and break up the space, right? So maybe underneath that contact information, if you have your name on one line and then you've got your contact information, a little smaller font directly below that. Oftentimes I'll put a line in, to break up the space. But then I want a title and then my professional summary because that's my pitch area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then what, Amanda? I'm sorry. Maureen, you want to take us to the next part?
And then what I would do is the professional summary. But the first thing is, tell the reader what you want to do. We all know you're enthusiastic and energetic and detailed-oriented, but I want to know.
So what would yours sound
straight
like?
Up. Talent acquisition professional.
And then you're seeking
blah, 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 blah. Or
what
talent
would it say?
Oh, gosh, put me on the spot. Talent acquisition.
This is radio, man.
Talent acquisition professional with comfortable in identifying talent in multiple industries, proven success with developing strong relationships. Recruitment is about relationships, and then on and on.
So you're giving me like your 30-second elevator speech.
Yes.
All right. So what do you think about that, Amanda?
I agree. Maureen puts the name of the role, talent acquisition professional, at the beginning of her professional summary. I do the same. I have it as its own line, and then directly below that, I've reiterated again. So, for instance, I'd say, certified professional career coach and resume writer with, 10 plus years of experience coaching clients and rewriting resumes to land the right job sooner. So I'm opening with kind of my tagline. Mm-hmm. And then I would go into more details about what I've accomplished and the industries or types of clients I've worked in, so that, people understand what I'm going after. And then I put in my core competencies or areas of expertise section.
Which I think is important. And people don't, sometimes, Amanda, people put in core competencies, they use adjectives. They say energetic, and
no.
That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for
that's marketing fluff.
Strong sourcer. I work a lot with accountants, so I want somebody with technical accounting abilities. Maybe they have revenue recognition. If it's an HR person, maybe they've had. I just spoke with a lady the other day. She was at our meeting, and I had told her she has union experience. Dealing with labor issues. And I said, you really need to put that in your resume, because not a lot of talent out there has union experience. I got an email from her the other day. She has an interview with the airlines because of her union experience.
That's awesome.
And she put that under her competencies. So
an inventory of core competencies is something someone should do to pull from when they build their resume.
I believe so.
As part of the bucket of things that they can start solving.
So you're looking at the resume. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm all about. Here's what my strengths are. And again, you're developing a story. And then we're going to get into the body of the resume.
Let's talk about the body.
The one thing I'd say is that at the end of that summary, there are certain little things you can add in there that are added bonus if you can put it. So, for instance, if you're bilingual in what languages you speak, or if you are open to 75% travel, 100% travel. Again, look back at the job description. What are the different pieces that they're looking for? And if that resonates with you, if you have whatever they're looking for, make sure that's in there. Those are selling points.
Basically, in a way, reading back the job descriptions, like for me, it would be, Lauren Epstein's a talent acquisition professional who's worked globally and has hired thousands of people in India and Asia and has implemented applicant tracking systems. If all that stuff is in the job description, feeding it back here is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next piece. So you have the body. I mean, the heading summary. What's the next thing that comes? Because there's chronology, and then there's.
I do not like functional.
You don't like functional?
No. How about you, Amanda?
No.
So let's talk about what a functional resume is, so people know what we hate, because we all hate them.
So functional blows any type of chronology out the window. Basically, it says, okay, you're looking for, this is the worst example ever, but people skills. Let me give you a blurb about all the different times I leveraged that skill set. And it goes based on certain skills or functions, different, technical qualifications, as opposed to give me a list of your experience, starting with the most recent role, and talk to me about what you did, and more importantly, what were the results you contributed to or achieved.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the story part, right? So when I look at a resume and I see 5 or 6 jobs, and the first one's the most recent date, and they kind of go down, I go, okay, this is going to be a story, and I can see they have this role now, they had that role then, and it makes sense to me. In my mind, in my linear mind, it all adds up. If I see it where there's just a paragraph about how they dealt with people or how they dealt with numbers, it doesn't, I can't understand it.
And I don't know when you want to get into the bullets, but I'm a big fan of the bullets, because some people...
we're almost at bullets.
We're almost at bullets. All right, I'll hold tight on that one.
But I want to hear your bullet comments. They got to be in bullet format.
They got to be good. If you don't have a bullet, I'm not talking to you.
The one thing I'd say, though, or I'd ask both of you, is that if you see a functional resume, doesn't that kind of raise a few red flags and you say, what are they hiding?
Totally.
Because you only use a functional resume when you're trying to hide something.
Good point.
And sometimes
fakers, if you're listening and you had a faker, you're a faker.
There's always something there because you don't use that format unless chronological, or I call it a hybrid because it's, it also talks about your skills, but it's, in chronological order. That typically is the best way and the most popular way that a recruiter wants to read your experience. We know in those 6 seconds when they look at a resume, besides looking at your name, they're looking at your most recent role, title, start and end dates, and then the role right before that, start and end dates, and education. If they have to pick and choose and they have to try and figure that out, they're not going to spend that time on your resume. They're on to the next of the pile of 200.
Let's go to the next thing. So the next thing after your summary is what? You have so it's chronological, meaning that the first thing is the most recent job. So you have what? What's the first thing that you put?
Well, one of my pet peeves is I don't care if the title's on top or the company. I think it's your style. I typically like to see the company name in bold, comma, location, unbold, and then all the way to the right, the total years that you've been at that client. Because
you're looking from the recruiting. Ooh.
I guess I said that right. I guess I got my point across.
We're going to cut that out. So we only have a few more minutes left.
Okay.
So
when I look at a resume, I look quickly down the right-hand side to see how many. I look for job moves too, because that's a red flag. So if you've been with Marriott for 15 years, but you've been in all these different positions, and you have out to the right, 2000 to 2003, I was assistant, and then 2003 to 2005, and that's out to the right. I'm looking quickly, and I'm assuming you have a lot of job moves. But in reality, you've been at Marriott the whole time. So you pull those promotions. You want to show your promotions, but I recommend you pull the dates to the left of your time at your position in unbold.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people now move every 2 years. So it's very common for someone to move every couple of years. It used to be that if you move so quickly, it was a question mark and a red flag, but now that's not the case.
Well, 2 years, it still can be the case.
I mean, around here, companies change, they come and go, particularly in the high-tech sector. But Amanda, what do you think about that? What do you think about the date component of the resume?
I definitely think that I'm not as particular about does it need to be bolded and that sort of thing. There are techniques to do. So, okay, if you're unemployed at the moment, you probably put your dates closer in because you don't want them popping out as much because you're hoping they kind of glaze over that fact and are concentrating more on your experience. But I always like next to the company, whether it's all the way to the right or directly next to the company name and the location of that company, I like to see, start date, end date for your entire time at that organization, and then a one-liner about that company, job title, and the dates for each job title. Because, again, it's telling a story. Did you take on new responsibilities? Is it clear that they like you so much they've given you all these different types of roles?
So, Amanda, I'm gonna cut you off for a second. But so under each job, we put stuff about what you did, right? So you want to have factual things that you did, that you accomplished.
Those are called bullets.
Bullets. Now we're at bullets. Give me your bullets.
I'm going to challenge your all bullet.
Really?
Your all bullet format. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Okay, so you have a bullet format, which is boom, 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 boom.
Boom, 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 boom.
And Amanda's got...
So
we're running out of time,
it's going to depend on what you have to work with, but I like 1 or 2 lines that sums up your role and responsibilities, the size of the budget you dealt with, number of people, what were you responsible for doing, and the bullets are used as a tool to draw your attention to the most important information, the most brag-worthy. So I always say bullet points equal bragging points. That's where your accomplishments and major contributions go, quantified whenever possible.
Absolutely.
Don't talk about you did a bunch of stuff, show the results. So with this role you held, what did you actually achieve? What are the selected achievements, contributions, that sort of thing?
So in the meat of the resume, we're talking about tell me your results, what you accomplished, that demonstrates that you have those abilities.
And that's where I say at the end of each statement, say, so what? Is it really relevant? I think that's important, especially when you want to cut it back because we want to talk about...
Let's jump to the end. The end of the resume, people put activities, they put religious affiliations, they put, they won the beer drinking contest. What else should be in the resume besides what they did?
Education.
Right, education.
Certifications.
Professional development.
What else?
And I still feel that software should be on there, Amanda, and it should be quantified.
Technical proficiencies, and not these dots that say, 5 for this for SAP and 3. Nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
You're judging yourself.
Well,
are you an expert? Are you proficient? Or are you a beginner? And what are the major skills? I don't think it's necessarily important to put Microsoft Suite unless you're dealing with somebody who may be very seasoned in their career and there may be some assumptions, read age discrimination being pulled in there, and they need to prove that,
Hang on. I want to get some, you're hitting on some good stuff. How many pages should the resume be? Two? What do you think, Amanda?
1 if you're entry level. 1 if you're entry
Correct.
level. 2 if you have, at least 5 years in.
And how many years should I go back?
15.
15. What if 15 is 20 jobs?
You get
I might pass up on you.
Well, but still, they got to write a resume. All right, well, so we're talking about white paper, 2 pages, maybe 3? You won't give me 3?
Sometimes I'll give 3, but I also want to say there should be good white space. I feel that there should be a line. You should use a line between different sections.
You like lines?
Yep.
I do.
Oh, I don't like lines.
Oh, I do.
All
I
right.
do.
Okay.
I do. The other thing is, I want to touch on a point that Amanda said. Amanda, with the MS Suite, sometimes it's Excel, PowerPoint, but I also like when candidates quantify like their Excel skills.
But how do they qualify their Excel skills?
Well, there's certain functions that are advanced functions. So if, like, I can use Excel, I can data entry in Excel, but I can't do a macros and I can't do budgeting and all this fancy stuff. So if you can do that, you want to say advanced functions of Excel.
And it's relevant to your role.
Exactly.
And it's relevant to the role. All right, so...
If they don't care and they're not asking about it, you don't need it. I would mimic back whatever they're saying when they ask for those specific skills. Otherwise, I just put expert, proficient, or I just leave it.
Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to end the show now, and we're going to pick it up, and like Jon Stewart used to do, we're going to throw it up on the internet. So, Amanda, tell me, how can folks reach out to you?
Oh, hit me up at, you can either go on my Facebook page, just look for Amanda Augustine. You can go to Twitter at JobSearchAmanda. And of course, if you go to Top Resume and click on Career Advice, you can get resume samples as well as all of my advice and that of my colleagues.
Awesome. And Maureen, how can folks find you?
Well, my company website is talent-strategy.net. And on there's all my contact information, my email, my office number, and, love to start a conversation.
Awesome. We're going to keep talking. We're going to end the show now. You're listening to You're Hired, 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. I'm Lauren Epstein, your host, and this has been a great episode of talking about how to write your resume to get the job. We'll see you next week here on You're Hired. If you want to listen to the rest of this, you go to yourhiredradio.com and click on the radio page, and you'll see the whole show, which is going to have a few more minutes. We're going to keep talking. So thanks very much. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's keep going. So, because we kind of glossed over a couple of things. Take me back, Amanda, to the meat of the resume. Right? Because we kind of moved through that quickly.
Yeah. I look at each, when you're defining each, we're talking about professional history section, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I like to have, the big thing about bullets versus dense blocks of text, whenever the entire resume is one or the other, your eyes kind of glaze over. So that's why I like to have a little bit, not huge paragraphs. I'm talking about 2 or 3 lines, but a really seasoned person, maybe they get 3 to 5 max. But give me the little summary that explains what was your role about, what were you responsible for, and then give me bullets anywhere from 2 to 5, depending on what you have to brag about, that really says, okay, and based on this role, this is what I've accomplished. Or if I'm less senior, maybe this is what I contributed to. This is how I helped improve the company, move the needle, help my team. When you can, quantify. Start with what did you impact? What was the result? And then how did you make that happen?
And what about resume overinflation? Because I see that a ton.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add on to what Amanda said. One of the things that you would like, what's a good idea to do is just Google action words or adverbs that you can
Action
find
verbs,
them out there and start each bullet with an action verb if it's possible. The lengthy resume. I've tried to cut resumes down. My recommendation is your most current employment should probably have the most bullets. And as the further back you go, just start eliminating. Say, so what? Is it really relevant? Just if it's not relevant to the job, just take it out. If you could have one bullet under a job.
Right. The
It's
further
a fine
back it goes,
line.
it doesn't really matter, right?
Right. And there's a fine line between not enough information and too much information. And it's how you craft that bullet.
You're making me think I'm going to get Amanda's company to do my resume again.
No, you're right. I looked at your resume.
You did they did your resume.
Yeah, they did it last year, but
it's
I've
an
done some more work.
evolution, right?
Okay.
And I think I need to
Right.
kind of build that out, the new work out more.
Yeah, and again, it's also, I do agree that typically your more recent work gets the most resume real estate. It's a hot commodity, right?
Absolutely.
But if your most recent role is not very relevant to what you want to be doing, or you held it for a very short amount of time, there's only so much you can write about it.
Absolutely.
So, if your most recent job was the short gig you took or it didn't work out, give it a little space, but then the meat of your resume is probably the role underneath it if that's more relevant. So, the jobs 15 years ago, they're going to get a lot less space. They're also on the second page, so we know how quickly they're glancing at these resumes. But make sure that every time you're looking at each job in your history and you're assessing it, it's, well, how relevant is it to what I want to do now, and what pieces of that job should I be highlighting?
Okay, and so what's the next piece? So I think we have a sense now of what our body is. What's the end?
I would say after the body would be education.
So you guys are education at the bottom?
Oh, if you're not new to the workforce.
Right.
The top third of your resume is that snapshot. It's the most important, and it should be your most important selling points. If you're fresh out of school, that shiny new degree is probably one of your most important selling points right now. So it needs to be above your work experience, because that's probably the thing you have to brag the most about at the moment.
Okay,
I have a question for Amanda. Amanda, I do a lot
Although
of work.
we're going to the internet, I do have another show.
Okay. I have a question. Just people want to put MBA next to their name. How do you feel about that?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was biting my tongue because I forgot to mention it earlier. If you have a certification that's very relevant to your current job goal, put that acronym after your name at the very top of your resume.
I work a lot with
Even if you're a new
CPAs.
grad, if you just got your MBA, I still think that MBA experience belongs in the education section at the back of your resume. However, you make sure it gets mentioned in that top third. You put the acronym after your name, and this is only for advanced degrees, not just your BA. So an MBA, an LLM. If there's any certification you have that's current and very relevant and considered desirable in your target job, that can go after your name.
So in my resume, next to my name, it says SHRM SCP, which is a SHRM certification.
Right.
But I don't talk about it like a lot.
But people
it's
don't
there.
realize they bury it down in the bottom, and especially in this area, people are looking for those certifications.
So some of the things, could I put like my writing up there, like my writing for articles I've written? What about?
I would mention that you're a writer. Mention the pieces that are most important, and if they're interested in that, they are more likely to go and then look for that section.
Well, couldn't I have
So
like
don't
a
think it
publication
needs to dominate.
section? But like, couldn't I have a publication section where I have hot links?
You
to?
could, and
But
if
at the
it's
end.
too long, then I would put it in my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, so then
I think if you have some noteworthy pieces, you can put them in, but they're going to go towards the end of the resume. That's an extra piece. It shouldn't be the headliner.
So do we miss anything? We've got education. We've got publications. We said we're going to put our... Go ahead.
You made a mention of hobbies and that sort of thing, so I just like to put my line in the sand on those sorts of things. And unless you're a recent college grad going for your first job, I don't think you should be putting all of your your activities or anything like that on there. Put it on your LinkedIn profile. That's the more social version, the more holistic version of you that you're advertising. But the resume, you're really not putting those types of things on. You may put activities that you're involved in, such as if you are, the treasurer of, the local advertising club and you're in advertising, or, you do a lot of speaking in your role or you're expected to, and you happen to be involved in the local Toastmasters.
See, I think we're talking about speaking. So I have a bunch of videos that I've done professionally. I would put links to that because I'd want them to see me in action, see me speaking.
I would assume that your LinkedIn profile has media added to it, and you peppered that profile, or you have a personal website with all of that information, and those links would be included at the very top with your contact information.
Okay, so you're saying
but
overarching.
I wouldn't necessarily just throw them in everywhere.
So you're saying overarching, give them a path to more information.
Absolutely.
So the resume is kind of like this defined space, and if they want to learn more, they got to go someplace else.
And most recruiters do. We go right to LinkedIn. One pet peeve I have: you don't need on the resume anymore references. Requested.
Right.
It's just a waste of space, and you're typically trying to cut it off, so you can leave that off as well.
Everybody knows you're going to give references if they ask. Everyone knows, and you don't need it initially. They're first going to screen you over the phone or bring you in for an interview. If you make it to that spot, that's when they'll ask for references. That's when you give that information.
Right, which gets back to it's really important not to put your address, your social security number, or other personal information like that on your resume.
No. Correct.
Because you'll give it to them once you get the job,
Absolutely.
or you need to fill out an application.
Don't forget your email, though.
I've seen a lot of photographs, particularly from Europe, on their resume.
I don't like that.
And I haven't seen Americans do it, but it's an interesting concept that
there are very
Europe,
different rules.
Yeah.
The CV is very different than the resume. I mean, yes, it tells the story, but details that U.S. recruiters and hiring managers cringe at are actually very standard. Marital status.
Really?
Their grades from school, things that are well beyond, when they're in their professions. It's not what you put on a resume. Same thing, profile picture. That's a CV tactic that they still employ. Here today, I know a lot of employers that will immediately throw a resume in the trash if it has a picture pinned to it, and you're sending it paper, snail mail, or an image embedded in, because they don't want to be accused of discriminating. So they don't even want you in the mix. I know people, if you have the very advanced level of the recruiter license for LinkedIn, I don't know if this still stands true, but they have the ability to actually, not to review profiles without seeing a picture because they don't want to be accused of discrimination.
Yeah, it's $14,000 a year. That's probably why you don't know that.
I like my regular LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn can be very expensive, professional. All right, well, this is I want to say I really appreciate you both sharing I think this was great. I think people are going to really get a lot of value out of listening to the show and getting a sense of how they could write their resume, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. So I want to thank you both again. And
thank you.
Thank you.
We'll encourage our audience to reach out to both TopResume and Amanda and Maureen and Talent Strategy. You all have a good rest of the day. Thanks for listening to this extended edition of Your Hired Radio here on WERA 96.7 Arlington, Virginia.